Welcome to the Business and Bubbly podcast. This is the place for women in business who are on the journey of building their big ideas and want to have fun along the way. It's for those of us who also know we aren't meant to do business or life alone. Hi, I'm Charity Majors, your host and the founder of Business and Bubbly. Think of this kind of like the can I pick your brain chats that you've always wanted to have with those who are doing epic things, plus business besties, hype girls, and getting into massive action towards your next big idea all in the same place. Oh, and bubbles, because if you're not having fun along the way, you're not doing it right. Together, we'll unlock what it means to be seen, known, heard, and championed all along the ups and downs of entrepreneurship and being a woman in business building big dreams. Each week, I'll bring you a quick sip business tip, as well as interviews from top experts that make you feel like you're getting bottle service for your business. We're having the raw and real conversations and chatting about all the things, the messy middle, the pivots, scaling, the good days and the bad days, because here we do real. It's where we can work hard, play hard, cry it out, and dance it out all at the same time without being judged. This is a place where we are in the arena together and we are each other's biggest fans because most of us have enough comments from the cheap seats. It's where our too much is par for the course and where the gaps of our not enough are filled in by the other epic women that are around us. It's where we can be unapologetic about the mission we are on, about the big dreams on our heart, and the business we are building without having to be perfect or have it all together, or even pretend to. It's a supportive community where business is being done amongst like-minded women, because when money gets in the hands of good women, great things happen. It's a place where you have the support around you to get out of your comfort zone and go after your big ideas, because even when you fail forward or when you reach the top, you know it won't be alone. Also, if you know anything about me, you'll know that I'm obsessed with creating platforms that lift up other women to be seen and heard and known. So with that in mind, I'd like to invite you to list your business on our directory called Find Women in Business. All you've got to do is text the word directory to 833-231-8098, and I'll text you the link back to get your free listing. This is also a great way to connect with other women in business from around the world, so definitely check it out. And now let's get to the good stuff. Grab a glass of your favorite beverage, Prosecco, bubbly water, or whatever your flavor is, and let's dive in. Are you with me? Here we go. All right, you guys, welcome to the Meant for More podcast. And just as you heard, David and Angelike Norrie, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your, not only your turned on message, but really looking forward to a new and a better normal than what we have been experiencing even in the past, even if things were great. So thank you guys so much for being here. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Hi. Thank you, Charity, for having us.
How are you?
Doing good. Well, before we kind of dive into some of the awesome conversation that I know that we're going to have, I would actually love for you to share a little bit about your backstory, kind of before, right? Because things weren't always this way. So what was a little bit of your journey of what got you to this place of being so convicted, of living a life that is turned on, living a life that is right, like meant for more. And how did you get there?
Okay. So we had transitioned from being basically in corporate America into what you would call the entrepreneurial space. And as we did that, we started to kind of wonder what our gifts were. How can we combine all these years of things that are different backgrounds? We were both into health and fitness. I had written for years. I had a column called Give Me 10 in a newspaper in Tampa. I had written about sports. Angelike was a fitness competitor. So we had that. Then we had our sales background. We both had, she was with one company doing orthopedic sales. I was with kind of like a competitor. So we had that. And now we're into this new space of being entrepreneurs. So what we saw was, hey, what's happening is more people are starting to market themselves online. More people are starting to have a presence on social media in order to promote their brand or their vision. And we saw people that were kind of watering it down, being bland. Because let's face it, now all of a sudden, look, we're all have to have this personality to reach across right now the airwaves, and whether it's on the internet or whether it's even in person. So I started to formulate something called Speak Up, and it was just for my team. And it was just kind of like, how can I get people to kind of come out of their shells and be more expressive and really turn their personality into profit? And then it started bleeding into other areas. I had friends that were in real estate come into the class. I had friends who owned beauty salons come into class. Anybody who worked with the public where their profit would benefit from having a greater presence and personality. In doing so, I created a workbook, and this is how it gets into the Turned On. I created this workbook, and there was one particular picture that I used for this workbook, and it was of a kind of
coffee shop.
No, it wasn't a coffee shop. What are you in the malls when they have the
food court?
A food court. And there's these 7 or 8 kids in line for a food court. So picture this. And if you're looking at them from the side, of those 7 or 8 kids, every single one of them was looking down at their phone with their head kinked down, except for one. One didn't have anything in her hands, and she was just sitting there. And so when we did live presentations, or when I presented this workbook, my simple question would be, hey, look at this picture, and you tell me who is turned on. And I use that concept, like who is up for the relationship, who's up for the conversation, if you had to pick a person. And so the average person, it was like it's the person who's not looking down at their phone. That person is turned on. So take it a couple of years after that, and Angelique wants to do a podcast. And what did I say?
Well, we're better together than we are apart. So let's do one together. And, the idea when you start a podcast is, what are you going to name it? What are we going to call it? What are we going to do to get people to listen? And he said, let's call it Turned On. And we actually looked at even the domain turnedon.com, which we own, which was not easy, by the way, because I bought all the other $10 ones, like the Turn On Your Life, turnitallon.com, all of it. And he's like, let's go all in. And it was expensive. It was a $10,000 domain. And the shock was that it was actually available, because when you hear turnedon.com, more than likely you're not thinking about marketplace ministry. You're probably thinking about something else. So the whole idea was like, all right, if we're going to break a pattern here, we're going to go big. And, the interesting thing is when we decided to start this podcast, and when we were, working with the ideas of what this was going to look and feel like and what it meant, we were in Disney World one day, and there was a family of 4 sitting at this beautiful restaurant that we go to every year. And the fireworks are going on outside, and it's parents and 2 young kids, and each one of them on our different devices. And we looked at each other and said, oh my gosh, like this is infiltrating the families in the most, memorable moments of their life. Their heads are down in their device. And so I said, okay, well, if we're going to talk about Turned On, having to do with technology, and we're coming to people by the means of technology, we have to realize that we can't villainize it, but we also know it's a slippery slope. And so then I asked David, I said, well, why are our heads down? Our heads are down because we're seeking something. Our heads are down because we're sedated, we're numbing out, we're pushing down, grief and pain and unworthiness or whatever it might be. And we're looking for answers in the means or the forms through technology or through other people. And then I have to ask that question, well, who is turning us on? And if the answer isn't God first, it has a really hard time of having that golden thread into the other areas of your lives. So it always kind of ties back to faith for us. And but we know that there's many ways to flip the switch, not only in your faith, but in your body and your home team and in the marketplace.
And lastly, real quick, we want it to be something that kind of a metaphor which anybody could understand. So I come from a journalism background, and the golden rule in journalism is make it easy enough that an 8th grader understands it. You know, let's not try and reinvent the wheel. And so Turned On became something that I see it right now taking place, even my children, because the concept is my 4-year-old looks at my 8-year-old who's on her iPad and goes, Ella, you're turned off right now. Yeah. And Ella goes, no, I'm not turned off. So she realizes what we mean by that. The 4-year-old knows what it means, and the 8-year-old knows what it means. So it's one of those things that we can apply to our body. You can turn on and off your body. You can turn on and off your faith, your business, and certainly your marriage. So those are our big four.
Yep.
I love
Switch.
that so much. Let's chat a little bit about flipping the switch, right? Because there is like exactly what you're saying. There is this, like, there's something that can happen and you see it in people and you can't, like, it's flipping the switch is perfect because all of a sudden you see someone who, like, their personality is gone, their head is down, they're in their screen, they are whatever, right? They're numbing out, they're veg
Yep.
out, they're not in their bodies, and all of a sudden something happens and boom, like they're there and they're present and they are engaged and you are connected to their heart, to their soul, and I love that, like flipping the switch. So let's chat a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So there's three main things in the book, and you just nailed it. Presence is one of them. We have to be more present. And like Angelique just said in that story, imagine how much it costs a family of four to go to Disney World. It's a couple grand. It's at least it could be upwards of 10,000. So you want to go over there and tap that family. Go, sir, how you spent $10,000 to have your family here? There's fireworks going on inside. You could see Magic Kingdom out the window, and you guys are all choosing to look down at a device. I mean, it's pretty obvious. If we look at it from our business, you know, the flipping of the switch is one of those things because Charity, what happens when people are upset with the way their business or career is going? And they think, geez, I just don't know if I can do anything else. It seems like such a big hill to climb at the time. If we look at a marriage, if a husband and wife, if their marriage is on the rocks, like, I don't know if anything can save this. It seems like such a big hill to climb. If you're 100 pounds overweight, I don't know how I could start losing weight. It seems like such a big hill to climb. So we don't want to say, hey, you know what? You can't fix it all in one day. This is nothing that a 3-day seminar is going to cure you of. This is nothing that one book is going to cure you of. What we're planning to do is create awareness and flipping that switch and doing the easiest thing. If you walk into a room, the first thing you do is you have to turn on a light if it's dark. It's so easy, a toddler can flip on a light switch. If you turn it on, everything else that you have to do in that room is that much easier because it's illuminated. If you leave the room dark, you're going to bump, you're going to hit your shin, you're going to bump into things, you can't find anything. So that is the concept of flipping the switch. In our body, start drinking a glass of water each day. It's the easiest thing you can do to start losing weight and feel better about yourself. If your marriage is on the rocks, gut up, have a real conversation, sit down, and let's discuss with humility what's wrong with our marriage, but let's discuss what's good with our marriage, what got us this far, and let's have that tough conversation. And then Angelique likes to speak about turned on and the biblical aspect of shining light.
Yeah. So when I think, even going back to the story of getting the domain and you're like, oh my gosh, turned on means something else to the world. When you flip a switch into a dark room and you turn the light on, you break darkness, right? You break a pattern. So anything that has been pushed down or ignored or avoided over time is now exposed. And I think about it biblically, and I always go back to how God created things. And in the beginning, of course, there was him, and then the heavens and the earth. And then somewhere along the way, there was some kind of chaos, right? Because it was formless and void. So when he saw the formless and void, expanse of what heavens and earth was, he spoke to it and he said, let there be light. And so when you break the pattern of chaos, or you break the pattern of darkness, or you break the pattern of the formless void in your life, that means we're willing to address it. That means we're willing to face it head on. And I think, we've done a lot of self-development over the years. Oftentimes we talk about fear as this elusive thing that doesn't exist and it appears real. Well, I challenge that a little bit because I believe that generationally we can build up things that create strongholds in our lives, and we can ignore them and pretend that if we write them on paper and burn it in a ceremony that they're gone. That's not true. It's not true. What's true is the fact that I need to face this and I need to address it, and I need to keep flipping switches in the long hallways of my life, like David has talked about: faith, health, home team, and the marketplace. And we want to keep them along and on all the time. But you don't just flip the first switch. You got to keep going. So it's more than just burning it on paper. It's constantly being aware of the things that can sideline us and take us off course, because it only takes one slippery slope before we wake up one day and go, oh my gosh, what happened?
Well,
What happened?
a fire burns out, right? You don't just light a fire once and then it stays lit. If you put new bulbs, eventually you're gonna have to change the bulb. So the light metaphor works because you constantly have to, what we call in the book, you could go on cruise control and autopilot, or you can take control of your life. And turning on really is about taking control. Because if you think about it, Charity, most people think that those things are too hard to achieve. And the ironic part is they will go on cruise control and they'll tune out when ironically the night before they probably hit their knees saying, God, can you do something to help my love life, my career, or something? And the irony is God says, hey, lift your head up out of the device, meet people, get outside, start to take responsibility for your life. I'm with you always, but you're going to have to meet me halfway. God's not going to come knocking on your door going and pull you off your couch and away from Netflix or away from social media and say, hey, let me come introduce you to the person of your dreams, or let me come give you that job. You have to surrender to God and then be willing to be active and say, I'm following the path that you asked me to, and I trust that you're going to meet me halfway and take me where I need to go.
Yeah, that's so good. So, and I love what you're saying, where it's like, gosh, like, okay, we've got to be able to turn the light on, but it takes that awareness and it takes the guts really to say, you know what, actually, I'm not going to be okay with this thing hiding under the rug or this thing being hidden in the dark closet. And I'm going to face the shame and I'm going to face the hurt. And I'm going to face whatever has gone on from my past, whether it happened to me or for me, or it was learned or whatever. And all of a sudden, like, I'm not allowing it to be in my life anymore. And it's because I want that healing. It's because I want my light turned on. I love that so much. So I want to chat a little bit about, what does it look like to be turned off?
Okay, so I love it because we always like to explain things by explaining their antithesis. So turned off is assuming that, hey, you know what? We are being lulled to sleep. And it's kind of, if we look at what's going on right now, we have been lulled to sleep. How many people do you see on the news now are waking up going, hey, you know what? How does this work? How does the government work? How do my rights work? How did this disease or this virus get here? You know what? Because you tuned out. The government took you, or whoever the powers that be took you, and they rocked you like a baby to sleep. And they said, don't worry. You just, you keep watching Tiger King. Okay. We got you. You keep watching the Desperate Housewives of Beverly Hills and keep sending memes, and we'll take care of everything. And if you need to, we'll let you know. And then you wake up one day and go, wait a minute, I need to know, how do these laws get passed? How did this virus get here? I need control over my life. I don't want to surrender it to anybody else. And if we step back to something we're more familiar with, it's the food industry. You know, how many times are we waking up and going, hey, wait a minute, I just opened my Facebook. This person's 32 years old. They got this autoimmune disease. This person over here is just 39 and they got some weird kind of cancer. How is all this happening? And then we realize, well, they've been putting stuff in our foods. They've been disguising what we call natural nutrition, or maybe they've been putting stuff in our aluminums and the stuff in our body, and we haven't been woke to it. And being turned off in a marriage is a guy residing himself to his man cave and sitting there, if their sex life isn't working, well, I'll just watch porn over here on my computer and totally, not pay attention or raise these questions to my wife. Or maybe I won't ask her how she's doing, or I'll keep her down and she wants to have a new career. So what we're seeing is being turned off is relinquishing the most important parts of your life to fate. And in the book, I talk about that famous quote from Forrest Gump, where he says, life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, you just never know what you're going to get. No, it sounds good. Life's not a box of chocolates, because you know what? I've got the Whitman sampler and I like maybe 2 things out of the 50 in there. So I don't want to just be handed a box of chocolates and say, this is what you get. I want to pick my chocolates. I mean, that's a metaphor for it. So we have to control our lives, wake up, and it's about being alert, Ange, don't you think?
Well, going back to, we want to pick, I really believe that we are the hands and the feet and the mouthpiece for God. And so we have the ability to be in control of, or I shouldn't say control, but to steward these areas of our lives. That's a big difference. He's ultimately in control, and there's to me, there's a spiritual, battle going on all the time. So we are in essence like, at any given time, an event can happen in our lives. And believe me, I've been on the other side of those events through losing my parents and seeing things that just someone at my age shouldn't have had to see. And the end of the day is, how did I steward what I was responsible for? And through stewarding that, if we look at faith, we are asked to and called to steward in excellence. We're committed to excellence. And what David was saying just now is, if we just accept the Whitman sampler as a box of chocolates, that's not excellence. We just kind of, slough it off to, this is the hand I was dealt. Well, I thought I had the opportunity to play another hand and to flip the switch so that I did become awake during this game, and I can have a choice here, and I can rise up, and I can be a disciple, and I can steward this in such a way that I actually invest my talents, or I invest my time, or I invest in my relationships.
So if Charity, if you got the box of chocolates thing, right, you know what happens. Everybody listening, you can understand. You get a sampler, or you get something and you pick through it. Like, I like this one, I don't like that one, or jelly beans, whatever the fact. So in the book, I like to talk about another fictional character, a character named Lemony Snicket. I don't know if you have heard of him, but this quote is the antithesis, kind of like what you asked. What's the antithesis of being turned on? And he says, fate is like a strange, unpopular restaurant filled with odd little waiters who bring you things you never asked for and don't always like. That's what fate is. Being brought things to you. And that's, if we zoom out, that's what kind of, geez, I don't want to get political, but that's what that socialism type of thing is. Hey, we'll take care of you. You really don't have a lot of choices, but you're never really going to be wanted for anything. Like, we're going to give you money, and we're going to give you food, and we'll give you shelter, but it won't be great, and you won't be able to rise up above it. And that's not what America is about. America is about the American dream. Everybody have an equal playing field. And if you want a big house or a big car, or you want whatever you want something, go out and get it. So this is not a political book. It's a wake-up book, and it's more about balance. I said the first thing was about presence and being able to be alert. The next part is about balance. And we can get into that, but it's about balancing technology, balancing work, and balancing home.
Yeah, I love that. Let's chat about balance, because I think that that's something that is so, like, people are probably starting to understand how imbalanced they were right? I like to call it BC, before Corona.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, that's true.
The go, the do, the achieve.
Yeah.
We are in this global grounding. We're forced to sit here and say, okay, guess what? You get to be heart to heart and soul to soul with someone that may be making you feel uncomfortable, or maybe you should have been spending more time with your kids, or you get to say, actually, these things don't matter. This stuff doesn't matter. What really matters in my life, and moving forward out of this, right? After AD, after disease, is how do we, what do I want to leave in BC, and what do I want to take with me in AD, intentionally, and with intention, and through a conscious decision and choice. So let's talk about that.
So we haven't really seen the ramifications of what we're bringing into our homes, like with Google and with Alexa and these things. We're bringing things into our homes under the guise of advancement in technology, and we have no idea. Like, if I say, hey, you know what? We have Alexa in our home. This is great. I can tell her what to play. I can ask her for recipes. That's great. But in 5 or 10 years from now, if well, Alexa's been listening to us or data mining our stuff. Well, we didn't know that. Yeah, because you never know at the beginning. You never know what's going on. It's always afterward, and when you rush into things. If we look at the work-life balance, you work from home, right? You have children? Yeah. So what we're seeing is, this is great. Nobody wants to be in the cubicle anymore. But when you bring that laptop and you bring that cell phone, that work laptop, that work cell phone home, the sanctity of the home is now in friction with your time with your children. And so what we're seeing is how we balance that. We're still in the midst of this conversion of working from home, and now everybody's working from home. So sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. And it always starts as a slippery slope. One of the main themes of the book is the C.S. Lewis quote that says, the surest road to hell is a gradual one. When we first started working from home, like, well, these are our hours. We're not working on the weekends. We're not working at night, but we're working from home. And what happens, guys? Well, just this one, sweetheart, I know dinner can wait tonight. Just this one, I have a call at 8:00, just this one time. And then it's just this Saturday. This is the only Saturday. And now we don't have any structure in our home.
Yeah.
And so what happens there is, well, we're in the hustle mentality. This is BC, before Corona, hustle mentality, the grind mentality, the achievement mentality. And now we're spending more time with our family. We're like, wait a minute, there's more to the hustle and grind. So am I hustling and grinding so someday I can send my kids to Princeton or Harvard, or I can buy them this fancy new car? Or do my kids just really want me to spend more quality time with them? And that's what we're seeing. You're working so hard to give them financial stuff, but the most well-rounded, happiest kids growing up are the ones whose parents maybe didn't have as much, but they spent the time with them reading, playing, hanging out.
Well, Charity, when you talk about BC, and I think about just using the words hustle and grind, because I talked about that a lot, and that what we're really passionate about oftentimes is helping people become profitable in all areas of their life. And when I say profitable, it doesn't necessarily mean money, is to have an advantage without costing them their peace, without costing them their health, without costing them their marriage. And unfortunately, that hustle and grind and that constant productivity and income producing activity, that is the thing that has driven us to the slippery slope of losing everything that was intentional, that we were meant to steward. But then there's the other side of that where, and if I look at this spiritually and I say, okay, if I go to where I was confused and I felt like we were standing in the gap was, I would go to the seminar and I would go to a conference and I would take all the notes and I was like, geez, I feel like faith is completely absent here. Like no one's able to talk about faith. No one can mention the word God. All of that has been extracted from the overall message. But all these really practical, amazing strategies exist, yet somehow are void of the thing that governs me. But I'm just going to go do it anyway because that's what success leaves clues, right? And then I realized when I would go to church or listen to anything that was spiritually equipping or convicting, I said, okay, this is great, but how do I apply it into my life in business? How do I apply it to finances? How do I apply it when my marriage and our communication is falling by the wayside? How do I apply it in my body? Because sometimes you'll go to church and go, okay, there's people here that are equipped so beautifully spiritually, but man, they're driving their body into the ground. Their marriage is really lack thereof. And so you ask yourself, why is this? Why has the practicality been extracted from our spiritual walk, and why has the spirituality been extracted from our practical professionalism or how we live our lives? And I felt like being turned on was standing in that balance, you know existing in the gap and going, hey, both of you guys over here, God's been knocking on the door saying, put me in, coach. And both of you don't know how to work on either side. So turned on is standing there and looking at things spiritually so that you can actually handle what happens when technology is in your life, so that it doesn't become an idol, so that it doesn't become control or anything else for that matter, like David was talking about. So it's just a matter of looking at things in a zoomed out perspective and being able to apply that balance on a day-to-day schedule.
I love that so much because I think that so many times in this, right, we're spiritual beings in having this human experience. And so many times we forget that, right? We can forget that is actually like that we are mind, body, soul, and spirit, and that spiritual aspect of things. And even like, I like to say like the strategies of heaven that we get access to as
Mm-hmm.
as spiritual beings, as people that believe in God. Gosh, when we are able to shut out the noise, to get rid of the junk, to get rid of the busyness and the grind, and say, actually, right, seek first. Like
Mm-hmm.
what part, like what is God saying to me and to my spirit?
how's he communicating? Because it's not like I joke about this, but God's language, like his first language isn't English.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
We've got to figure out how our spirit communes and communicates with his
That's right.
Amen to that.
and vice
Well,
versa.
that's turned off. If you're turned off, it's because you're seeking out, outside input versus, going internal and having that personal relationship with God and hearing his voice, because it's not always in English. It's an unction, it's a movement, and it creates something in you that can't be found on Instagram. It can't be found in a course, not necessarily in a book unless it's the book. Like, that is a really important piece of what turned off looks like, is that we seek everything outside of him first, and therefore we've inverted the
Yeah.
divine order.
Mm.
You know what, for the person who is on a different walk, we got to realize, like, everybody's in a different faith walk, and so this seems kind of odd, but when we talk about God talking to you, everyone like, well, who has God talked to you? And we've actually run into people who are sane people, who are scholarly people, who are like literally the voice of God like told me to go. Like, I'm like, and for me, even a ardent believer, I'm like, so wait, let me get this right. Like, you heard God. Like, you didn't just, it wasn't your intuition, but you heard him. He's like, yes. And so, okay. So what this person also said is, he's 99% of the time, God speaks to us through our intuition, through our conscious, through our gut feelings. That is the internal voice of God that we hear. And we know 99% of the time, we know right from wrong. So whether it's your body, that donut is not right. Whether it's again, we go back to marriages, guys, that turning on that pornography is wrong. Okay, so we know this stuff, but there's still that battle that goes back and forth. So the question becomes, when are you going to surrender? For me, I was 35 years old. I had not been married. I was going nowhere in my career, and I had white knuckled it to that point, and I thought I was happy. And I said, you know what? There's got to be more than this. God's got to have more than this, but I need to have a connection with him first to find out where he wants me to go. So I started to crave God. I started to ask more questions, and I started to pray for answers, and I started to surrender. And that's when I found those other parts.
That's so good. And it's funny because I think that in today's society, with the word surrender, right? We think
Yeah.
this giving up, and I'm like totally just like, I'm out of the game. I surrender, I lose, I forfeit. But man, in with spiritual principles, surrender and trust is actually one of the most amazing places.
Yeah. And especially
It
for
is.
men, Charity, men really don't want to think of surrender as a word that means something positive.
Right,
To
big
them,
white
it really
flag.
means weakness. So it's important for men to surrender.
It's not a giving up at all. There is a radical surrender, and when you do that, there is a trust there that actually strengthens you and refines you, because that's a wilderness that nobody wants to see. But it's such a huge piece of growth where we actually relinquish everything back to God and say, "You do it," And I say this a lot in our Turned On method, and just in general with Turned On, is watch what he does in your rest.
Yeah.
Watch what he does in your rest, because we have been conditioned, to white knuckle everything. We have been conditioned to the hashtag hustle, to the hashtag grind. And that is where he can't be in the game. That's where we said, no, coach, you can't be in. So that's unfortunate, but it's, the surrender piece is something that I've had to learn. We've had to learn together, not only as a couple, but in business. Because essentially, if we don't surrender something that has that level of control in our lives, we've created an idol.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. It kind of reminds me of that picture. It's I'm sure it's floating around out there somewhere. You could probably Google it, but it's that picture of, like, you have this teddy bear, right? It's this little girl that has this teddy bear.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus is standing in front of her, and he's got this huge teddy bear back behind him. He's like, give it to me. Like, you
Yeah.
can trust me. It's okay.
It's funny you mentioned that.
But I love it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's funny you mention that, because I knew as you started to say that, I go, she's got, because I've thought of the same exact thing. Because at first when I saw that, it didn't really resonate to me at first what it was. I'm like, am I missing something here? Because everybody's sharing this. I'm like, oh, I get it. He's got the bigger teddy bear. And we've used that same exact analogy several times in our past podcasts about that. It's a great point.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, man, surrender is so uncomfortable. I know for me, I've been going through a lot of the surrender and a lot of the, right, because I'm very capable. Everything is Googleable and figure outable, and
Yep.
I like high achieving and like a 3 Enneagram and all this like great strengths finders, executing. And man, the surrender is everything, even out of my ability and capability. Like God still is continuing to say, I don't want you to do it in your own strength, because
Yeah.
if it's your own strength, then you've got to maintain it.
Yep.
If
There's
it's
that
not,
old
So
there's that
true.
old cliche. Well, not cliche. It's a saying. Have a dream so big that you can't do it on your own. That you need God's help.
Divine intervention. Yeah.
totally. So good. Awesome, you guys. Well, do you have any last minute thoughts before we end this out? And you guys, I want to make sure that we'll have everything in the show notes. But I mean, your guys' new book, Turned On, which congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting because it's hit number one in a couple different Amazon categories. And the last thing that I would say is we talked about presence, we talked about balance. The third thing would be opportunity, and opportunity comes when you are present, when you use balance. So it's just that kind of trinity things. You start to be more present in your family, in your work, in your body. You start to balance the things that that are holding you back, and bring up the good stuff and put down a little bit of the bad stuff. And then what you'll see is the opportunity start to unfold.
Yeah. You know, again, with being turned on in anything in your life, I think it really comes down to when we say flip the switch. If there is an area of your life right now, whether it's in your faith, in your home, in your body, in your business, that feels like the lights have gone out, the first thing that you have to do when you're going into that dark place where you're unsure, where you're trepidous, you just don't know what's next, you have to flip the switch. And someone says, okay, well, that's easy to say. Like, what does that mean? Where is this switch? How can I find it? And that's kind of what it feels like when you're walking into a dark hallway. It's like, where the heck is I know it's somewhere on this wall, right? I know it's somewhere on this wall. But if there is something that you're avoiding, if there is, something that has plagued you for long, that is the switch. And it's a matter of calling it out and speaking to it, because when we can hear our own voice, and we can speak that to God, and then speak it in the mirror, and then speak it to our relationships, and then speak it into our business, then we actually are behaving the way that God created us in his likeness. Is he saw something dark, he saw something formless, he spoke to it. And so the first thing that you can do is speak to it, and that declaration over your life, so that you can essentially start making changes. And like David said, the changes don't have to be overnight. My goodness, they can't be overnight. Sometimes it's just a matter of drinking more water. Sometimes it's a matter of a single conversation. But what I do know is that success in anything is on the other side of a tough conversation. And that conversation is in prayer, in the mirror, with a spouse, or in business. And that, to me and my husband, is where you begin to get turned on, is when you essentially start behaving, the way God designed you in operating the gifts that he gave you.
So good. I love that, you guys. Well, so David and Angelique, make sure that you let everyone know where they can find you and follow you. Obviously, you have your Turned On podcast. You guys can jump over there and listen and subscribe to their podcast as well. Grab a copy of their book. Any other social media, where can they find you, follow you, stalk you?
We tried to make it very easy. That's why we went all in on the Turned On. So it's turnedon.com. For the book, it's turnedon.com/book.
/.
/book. Yeah. turnedon.com/book. And then Instagram is probably the best place. It's davidnorrie.turnedon and Angelique Norrie.
Angelique Norrie on Instagram and Facebook as well. So yeah, turnedon.com. Easy.
Thank you so much for sharing your time, your message.
Thank you.
Honored to chat with you guys, and I'm looking forward to reading your book and
thank you
on it. So thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you, Charity. It was a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yes, thank you so much. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope it brought some value and some fun into your business and life. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, and even share the episode with a fellow business bestie who you know will love it. It helps us continue to attract top-level guests and reach more and more women who are on their journey in business just like you. Remember that when money gets in the hands of good women, great things happen. Cheers to your success.